Hi, I'm Scarlett. My dad flew to the coast with his new wife and her son, left me behind to sell cows just to keep the lights on. He didn't even say goodbye. They called me the caretaker, said I wasn't stable, said I didn't belong. But when I found my mother's will buried in a drawer she never meant to lock, I realized maybe I wasn't the one who needed to leave. And maybe I wasn't the only one they'd underestimated. The air smelled like hay and old pine, the kind of scent that clung to your clothes no matter how many times you washed them. I stood on the porch that morning, boots dusty, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of black coffee. 12 years. That's how long it had been since Mom passed and I stayed. Not because I didn't have other options. I had them. I stayed because I remembered every single thing she built here. The way she tilled the land like it was her prayer. The way she left her gloves on the fence post when the frost came early. I stayed because someone had to. The mountains in the distance wore a soft halo of mist. Barn doors moaned like they hadn't been touched in weeks, though I oiled them just last Sunday. And the porch, well, it creaked in the same place Mom used to rock in every evening. The old place wasn't fancy, but it was honest. I didn't hear his truck until it was halfway up the gravel drive. Declan hadn't called ahead, hadn't texted, nothing. Just showed up with Rowena and that son of hers, Thatcher. The three of them got out like they owned the sunrise. Declan clapped his hands, grinning. This air, Wyoming air, nothing like it, huh? He looked around like a stranger visiting a postcard, then patted the railing. You've been keeping this place real nice, Scar. I didn't answer, just nodded, waited. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a white envelope. You'll need this, he said, pushing it into my hand. Go ahead and start selling the cattle. Rent's due next week. Rent. It didn't register at first. Rent? On land my mother had bled into? I looked down at the envelope. Thick. No note. No explanation. Rowena turned her gaze to the side like she had better things to do. Thatcher chewed gum like he was stuck in a high school detention hall. Don't take it the wrong way, Declan added, his voice dipping into that fake friendly tone people use when they know they're wrong. It's just business. You know how it is. No, I didn't. But I smiled, nodded again, because that's what you do when your own father looks at you like a hired hand. That night, I went upstairs to grab my ledger from Mom's old desk. Habit. I liked checking records before dinner. The door to my old room wouldn't budge, locked. I tried again. Nothing. Rowena's voice floated up behind me. Oh, she said softly. I thought you'd moved everything down already. I needed the space. I stood there with the envelope still in my hand, staring at the door. That door, Mom's perfume used to hang in the air behind it. That room had the quilt she sewed with her own fingers, the one with the initials stitched in the corner. Declan didn't say a word, didn't even come upstairs, probably didn't even notice I hadn't said goodnight. And me? I stood there long enough for the silence to bite. At dinner, the four of us sat at the table, Declan, Rowena, Thatcher, and me. If you'd walked in, you'd think I was a tenant helping with chores. Rowena talked about a beach trip, finally resetting our life, she said, as if the last one never happened. Thatcher talked big plans for leasing the Westfield, once it's cleared out. I kept my eyes on my plate, couldn't taste a thing. I watched Rowena slice her chicken clean, dab her napkin like she was at some brunch in Charleston. I noticed how Declan wouldn't look at me, not once. The only sound was Thatcher chewing too loud. This isn't the time to fight, I told myself. Yet. Later, I sat on the porch. The sun had gone down, but the porch light hadn't flickered on. I hadn't flipped the switch. The envelope still sat next to me, unopened. My mind played through everything. Mom's birthday garden, the cattle I'd delivered, The winters I kept this place afloat, all of it. I thought about when I stopped being his daughter and became something else, something convenient. And then I heard it. Thatcher's footsteps upstairs, not hurried, not apologetic, just casual, like he belonged there. They walked like they owned the place. I picked up the envelope, opened it. Inside was a stack of cash. No note, no instruction, just money. I stared at it. A payment. I folded the envelope slowly, pressed it flat, and slid it beside the lantern. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But something inside me stood up. I didn't sleep that night, not because of the cash in the envelope, though it sat there on the porch railing like a loaded gun, but because of the silence. That kind of silence, heavy and stretched, says more than shouting ever could. I got up before the sun. Didn't want to cross paths in the kitchen, not today. Instead, I headed out to the barn, boots crunching over the thin frost. On my way out, I saw Thatcher's muddy boots tossed near the back door, like the place was his garage, not mine, not even lined up, just thrown. Funny how fast a house stops feeling like home. Declan had already left. According to Rowena, he was out running errands. Errands that didn't need to be mentioned, I guess. He hadn't spoken to me since he handed me the envelope yesterday. No. How are you? No. Thanks for holding down the ranch. Just silence and avoidance. By late afternoon, I heard laughter rolling in from the backyard. When I stepped out to look, they were stringing up lights. Rowena, in her pastel button-up and clean boots, was organizing a barbecue. Said it was just a little something to celebrate family. Family. No one told me it was happening, but there I was, helping prep food because, well, as Rowena put it, you know where everything is, Scarlett. I chopped onions while neighbors I hadn't seen in years filtered in, smiling politely, not asking questions. My hands moved on their own while I watched Rowena put her arms around guests like she'd been part of this place longer than my mother ever had. Thatcher strolled in late, full of energy, high-fiving like he was the new mayor of Dutton Ridge. Declan, beer in hand, clinked bottles with someone from the feed store. Then he lifted his glass, placed an arm around Thatcher's shoulder, and said, loud enough for every damn person to hear, "Now this is the young man who's going to carry the Rourke name forward." They clapped, laughed. Someone whistled. I stood there, barbecue tongs still in my hand, the heat from the grill nothing compared to the burn crawling up my neck. I wasn't mad they forgot me. I was mad they remembered just enough to keep me useful. Later, when I was inside clearing dishes, I heard someone call out, "Okay, just the Rourkes." I froze mid-step, dropped the forks into the sink, rinsed my hands quickly and stepped outside, thinking maybe, just maybe, I was included. But I wasn't. There they stood in front of the barn. Rowena, perfectly posed. Thatcher flashing a peace sign. Declan smiling like he hadn't torn something out of someone else's chest to do it. No one looked for me. No one said my name. No one had to push me out of the frame. They simply never made space for me in it. That night, I walked past Declan's room on the way back to mine. The hallway creaked under my feet, just enough for me to pause. Inside, I heard Thatcher laughing. "I could totally take over this dump," he said. "Just give me the word." Declan chuckled like he was proud. "Let's not rush things. But yeah, she's not cut out for long term." I stopped, right there on the stairs, half in shadow. My throat tightened, not because I was surprised, but because it was so damn easy for them to say it, like I wasn't upstairs listening, like I didn't matter enough to whisper about. I didn't go into my room right away, just stood there, listening, breathing. The boxes in my room were still unpacked, been that way since I moved out of Mom's space. I sat beside them, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to remember what it felt like to hold something I hadn't let go of yet. I pulled out one of Mom's old journals from the trunk I'd kept under my bed. Flipped it open. There was a line underlined in red. Legacy isn't what you leave, it's what they fight to erase. You never taught me how to fight, Mom, I whispered. But you sure taught me what not to surrender. I didn't cry. Didn't curse. I grabbed a notepad and started writing down everything I could remember. The cows I'd raised, the contracts I'd signed, the repairs I'd made, every acre I'd worked, every call I'd handled. Proof, not for them, but for me. If I was going to be erased, I'd make damn sure they had to try harder. The clock read 11:17 when I finally laid down. My eyes stared at the ceiling, unblinking. That's when I heard the printer in Declan's office start humming. The soft mechanical whir, followed by the click of a car door slamming shut outside. It was the sound of a deal being printed, and maybe my legacy being signed away. The rain didn't start soft. It came down in sheets, hammering the tin roof like it was mad at me. I was in the barn feeding the cattle when it started, the morning air colder than usual. My shoulders ached, but not from the weather. Earlier that week, a neighbor dropped off some fencing wire. He'd smiled, looked around the place, and said, "Rowena's really turning this place around, huh?" I didn't answer, didn't even nod. I thought about that as I flipped through the barn records, checking feed cycles. A few pages were gone. Torn out, not misplaced, not dog-eared, gone. The edges were jagged, fresh. My mother's handwriting used to fill those pages, her careful numbers, her notes in the margins. Someone had taken them. That kind of loss doesn't make noise, but it cuts. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't someone being careless. It was someone trying to erase her. I left the barn without saying a word and made my way back to the house. Wet gravel stuck to my boots. I walked slower than usual, looking at every window like it might tell me something. Inside, I went straight to the hall closet, then up to the attic, then to the far side of the crawl space where the air smelled like mold and mouse droppings. The box wasn't there. The wooden box with the keepsakes, Mom's old letters, our land titles, family photos from when Declan still looked at me like his kid. It had always been there, tucked in the corner behind her sewing machine. Gone. I asked Declan, casually, later that afternoon, "Hey, you seen Mom's old keepsake box?" He didn't even look up from his coffee. "Which one?" "You know, the wood one with the carvings." He shrugged. "Haven't seen it in years." Rowena piped up from across the room. "Oh, that thing, probably full of mice by now. Old paper gathers dust and rats. Better gone than moldy." I didn't answer, just stood there. Better gone. That night, I stood in the kitchen and whispered it out loud. They didn't throw away the past. They incinerated it. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sit still either. At some point after midnight, I grabbed a flashlight and went to Mom's old desk. It hadn't been touched since they boxed up her things. The bottom drawer had always been locked. I'd never had the key. But a bobby pin and a steady hand do wonders. It clicked. Inside was a rough draft of Declan's will. A real one, with his handwriting. My name was on it. Once. Then I saw it. Thick red ink, slashing through my name like it was an error in a spelling test. Next to the crossout, he'd written, "Too emotional, not stable." I sat down on the floor, the paper limp in my hands. I read it 3 times, like maybe the words would change if I blinked fast enough. They didn't. It wasn't new. The paper had aged. The ink bled slightly through the lines. This wasn't a recent decision. He'd been writing me out for years, and I'd stayed, because I thought that mattered. For the first time, I said it out loud. Just to the room, just to myself. He never meant for me to stay. The next morning, I left the house before anyone was up. The rain hadn't stopped. My jacket was soaked through by the time I made it to the property line. I started walking. The fence on the east side, I'd fixed that 3 winters ago. Broke my wrist post-setting. No one visited me in the hospital, just me and the bill. The chicken coop. I rebuilt it after the tornado that took out half the shed. My own 2 hands. Not a single thank you. The first calf I ever pulled. The first time I handled the books. The time I caught the tax mistake that saved the ranch. Each step reminded me. The land remembered what people erase. I knelt in the mud near Mom's garden. Her roses hadn't bloomed since she passed, just stems and spite. I touched the soil, cold, alive, unforgiving. I swore to it. I wasn't going to let them write me out of what I kept alive. When I got back to the kitchen, Thatcher was at the table, tossing papers into a trash bag. Old forms, utility records, photocopies. He grinned. Clearing clutter. You know how Rowena gets about mess. Then I saw it. A photo. Me and Mom. I was 8. Dirt on my face, her hand on my back, crumpled on top of a paper plate. I reached for it. Thatcher glanced over and said, "Didn't know that was sentimental." I didn't answer, just started picking through the bag, quietly, flattening each paper on the table. The ink was still legible. My name. Her notes. He watched, confused, then bored. Let them think I'm quiet. Silence is a vault, and mine holds receipts. That night, I locked my door. For the first time in over a decade, I twisted the lock and checked it twice. Then I pulled the closet open, reached for the top shelf, and brought down an envelope. Tattered, yellowing, labeled in my mother's handwriting. For later, if needed, Mom. I wasn't ready to open it yet, but the day was coming when I'd need what was inside. The call came just after 9. I was in the office going over hay invoices, half listening to the creak of the barn gate in the wind. The number was out of town. "Ms. Vale?" the man asked. "You're listed as a contact for parcel 187 in Dutton Ridge?" "That's right," I said. "We've received paperwork about a pending ownership transfer. Can you confirm your role in the transaction?" I blinked. "I'm the daughter of the owner. This is my family's land." There was a pause on the other end. "Well, your name isn't listed on anything." That sentence landed like a steel-toed boot to the chest. I kept my voice steady. "Can you email me the documents?" "Sure thing," he replied. "Sending now." But the email never came. I checked junk, checked filters, refreshed the inbox. Nothing, just silence. Digital and deliberate. That sentence kept looping. Your name isn't listed. I didn't panic, didn't curse. I just sat there, still. Like if I moved, I'd shatter into too many pieces to collect. Later that afternoon, once the house was quiet, I grabbed the small crowbar from the tack room and opened the cabinet behind Declan's old desk. It used to be locked. Now it was just jammed. Inside were 3 folders, legal-sized, dusty, contracts, tax forms, insurance renewals. I flipped through the pages, my breath steady, my hands dry. Then I saw it, my name, printed neatly at the top of an authorization of access form, and a signature. My signature. Only it wasn't mine. It was too perfect. The curves too controlled. No hesitation, no uneven slant, none of the little trembles I'd always had in my loops. I stared at it for a full minute. The date said last fall. I hadn't signed anything last fall. I stood there in that office, holding the paper like it might bite. I didn't feel scared. I felt insulted. That night, I pulled an old birthday card from my keepsake box. I'd given it to Declan on his 60th. Handwritten, dated. My actual signature. I laid it next to the authorization copy, side by side. Same name, different hand. The forged one had too much space between letters. The tail of the T in Vale curved wrong. The capital S in Scarlett was looped backward. Someone had copied it, traced it, probably from an old check. And suddenly, I remembered. Rowena, months ago, asking for help balancing the checkbook. Would you mind signing this stub just to update the account? I'd thought it odd at the time, but I'd been tired, distracted. I'd signed it and handed it back. She had what she needed. This wasn't some rushed fraud, it was patient, intentional, plotted like a blueprint. Over dinner the next night, I didn't say much. I didn't slam down my fork or raise my voice. Instead, halfway through Rowena's story about a garden club she joined in Charleston, I asked, "You ever think about switching lawyers, Dad?" Declan flinched, not visibly, but enough for me to catch it. "Why do you ask that?" he replied too fast. I shrugged. "Just seems like good timing, that's all." He glanced at Rowena. She smiled, pivoted like a pro. "We've been talking about renewing our vows. 50-year anniversary coming up. Maybe we'll bundle the paperwork." I nodded. That makes sense. But I didn't look away. Declan picked at his napkin the rest of the meal. He didn't meet my eyes once. "You're not guilty if you're silent, but you sure as hell aren't innocent either." After dinner, I grabbed my coat and walked the property. The barn, the fence, the well pump I replaced last year, the storage shed I re-roofed with my own hands. I started snapping pictures, each one labeled, dated, logged. The greenhouse windows, the chicken coop repairs, the northern gate. And each photo whispered the same thing. I was here. This was mine. They want to erase me from the papers. Fine. But this land, it knows my name. When I got back to the house, I opened my laptop and started backing up every file. Photos, copies of checks, receipts. I named the folder Proof. Burned 2 flash drives. Hid one in my boot box, the other in the rafters of the feed shed, just in case. It was almost midnight when I walked upstairs. My feet were heavy, not from the day, but from the weight of restraint. I found a manila folder under my door. No name, just placed there, like a dare. Inside were copies of the same authorization forms I'd seen earlier, this time with highlights around the signature fields. Attached was a post-it note. "You didn't sign it, but someone did. A friend." I stared at it for a long while, and now I knew. I wasn't crazy, just deliberately kept in the dark. The knock at the screen door wasn't loud, just enough to pull me from the invoice sheets I'd been staring at too long. The delivery boy handed me the paper, folded in half like a sandwich. I didn't think twice about it, but when I unfolded it, I stopped breathing. Right there on the front page of the Dutton County Register, "Young Visionary Revives Rourke Ranch." Thatcher's face, smiling like he'd just solved a drought. Below it, a caption, "The Croft Legacy Takes Root in Wyoming." And then, small print, like a footnote on a bad joke. "Caretaker Scarlett Vale, longtime family helper. Not daughter, not co-owner, not even manager. Caretaker." My hands didn't shake right away. They just held on tight, like the paper might float away if I let go. I read it again, every line. My name, stripped of meaning. My years here, condensed into a polite title fit for a nursing home employee. They didn't just cut me out. They rewrote history like I was never there. After the sun had set and the kitchen had cleared, I sat with that newspaper folded beside me like a quiet threat. Something felt off, like I was standing on a floor that someone had started to saw through months ago, and I'd only just heard the wood groan. I went through the kitchen drawers, old tax slips, feed invoices, scribbled grocery lists. Then I saw it. A letter. Cream-colored, folded neat. Rowena's handwriting. Weeks ago, she'd handed it to me with a smile and said, "Just sign here, Scarlett. It's just a thank you for keeping things going while we settled in." Legalese formality, no big deal. At the time, I signed, because trust is dumb like that. Tonight, I held it up to the light. Tiny text at the bottom, practically microscopic. By signing, I had acknowledged full closure of any present and future claims to shared property. A thank you letter disguised as a knife. They baited me with courtesy, buried betrayal in a blessing. I rushed to the drawer where I kept copies of everything, my fallback file, but the copy of that document, gone. Someone had already started quietly closing doors behind me. I didn't sleep. By morning, I needed air. I grabbed my list for fencing supplies and drove to the hardware store in town. I needed something to do with my hands. Something real. I was halfway down aisle 6 when I heard them. Two women, talking just low enough to pretend they weren't trying to be overheard. Finally turning the place around. That young man, what's his name? Thatcher Croft, the other replied. Scarlett always looked a bit off, didn't she? Like she never left the past behind. I stood there with the fencing wire in my hand, every muscle in my arm burning. You can swallow pride. You can't swallow being erased. I didn't say anything. I left the wire in the cart and walked out. The bell over the door chimed like a punctuation mark. Later that night, I sat in the barn. The rain had let up, but the roof still dripped in time with the overhead bulb, which flickered like it was tired of watching me think. I opened the chest I'd tucked under the feed bags months ago, my secret, my only one. Inside was a Polaroid, Mom and me, kneeling in dirt, covered in it. First row of corn we ever planted together, my gap-toothed grin, her hands rough but sure on my shoulders. We didn't build this place for headlines. We built it so we'd have something no one could take away. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about being visible, being heard, having my name spoken without a question mark at the end. I picked up the old rotary phone from the barn wall and dialed the number Isolde gave me. Odessa Hale, a crisp voice answered. I said my name. And then I said, I need to meet, urgently. There was a long pause, then, I've been waiting for your call. The next thing I knew, I was walking through the back pasture. No coat. Just mud up to my knees and a breath in my chest that didn't shake anymore. When I reached the rose bush my mother planted by the well, I stopped. They almost had me, I whispered. The breeze kicked up like someone was listening. But I'm still here. The petals rustled, and for a second I could swear I heard her voice again, not loud, just firm. Then fight smart. I turned and walked back toward the house, this time with a rhythm in my step I hadn't felt in years. As I turned the key to my room, I stopped cold. There, on my bed, was the scarf. Her scarf, cream-colored, with the little stitched corner, VV, in her handwriting. No note, no context, just there, waiting. I'd buried my voice once. I wasn't about to let them bury hers, too. The wind picked up just as I tightened the last screw on the porch rail. I was crouched there, tool belt slipping around my hip, when I heard gravel crunch. Boots, not Declan's. He never walked that light. Isolde, she didn't knock, just stood on the edge of the porch like she belonged there. Her coat was open, hair pinned back like she had something to say, and didn't care if it made someone mad. She held out a manila envelope. Saw something I shouldn't have at the records office, she said. Figured you should see it instead. I wiped my hands on my jeans before taking it. My heart didn't pound. It just waited. Inside was a deed transfer request. Not finalized, but signed. Date stamped. Filed. New name on the owner line. Thatcher Croft. They came in Tuesday, she added. Rowena did most of the talking. He just stood there like a statue with a smirk. I didn't flinch, because by then, I wasn't shocked anymore. I was just finally catching up. She made coffee. I followed her into the kitchen where the smell of cinnamon and wood polish still lingered, same as it had since I was a girl sneaking butter cookies when no one was looking. We sat at her old table, the one with the corner gouged from a Thanksgiving accident nobody dared bring up anymore. She stirred her cup and said, "You think I just baked pies all those years, don't you?" I said nothing. She leaned forward. "I worked in court records before I married. Your mama and I weren't just close. We made promises to each other. And I keep mine." I didn't look at her. I looked down at the deed again. "There's someone you need to call," she said, sliding a napkin toward me. "A name. A number. Odessa Hale. Discreet, quiet, loyal to women who've been wronged and too damn polite to make a scene." I hesitated. "I don't want to start a war," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "You're not starting anything, Scarlett. You're stopping what they've already begun behind your back." I stared at that napkin. Then I picked up my phone. Odessa answered on the second ring. "Hale." I said my name. "I know," she replied. I walked her through it all. Carefully, I stuck to facts, not feelings. She didn't sound surprised once. "This happens more than you think," she said. "Emotional coercion, fake signatures, a gradual push toward powerlessness. It's calculated. Always is." She paused. "Do not confront them. Not yet. Start documenting. Scan everything. Don't leave anything in that house unless you want it shredded." That night, I didn't eat dinner. I packed up every document, receipt, bank slip I could find. I scanned them one by one, saved them twice, emailed a copy to Odessa. I labeled each folder with dates, backed them onto 2 separate flash drives. One went under the chicken feed bin, the other in the hollow leg of Mom's old nightstand. I found something else in the process. My grandfather's land survey. The one Rowena claimed got ruined in a flood. Pages dry as bone, dates clear, with Mom's handwriting on the side. Always cross-check legal coordinates. I laid it all out across the floor. Deeds, dates, email printouts, maps, tax notices, the newspaper clipping. When a puzzle doesn't fit, it's not because you're wrong. It's because someone switched the pieces. I didn't go to bed right away. I labeled a new folder, just in case. In case of emergency. I wrote it twice, underlined it once, and tucked it in the barn loft, behind the second beam. When I came back inside, Thatcher was at the counter, eating peanut butter from the jar like he owned the place. He looked at the folders stacked by the table and laughed. "Getting into scrapbooking now?" I smiled without showing teeth. "Something like that." He snorted, licked the spoon, and walked out. I wasn't ready to fight, but I was ready to be ready. Hours later, I moved slow down the hall toward my room. The rest of the house was quiet. You could hear the clock tick from the living room if you paid attention. Declan's office door was open just enough. Inside, under the soft lamp glow, Thatcher was kneeling by the bottom drawer, papers fanned across the floor. He was whispering to himself, flipping sheets like he had a deadline. I stood there, still, silent. He didn't know I saw, but tomorrow I'd make damn sure he knew I understood. The sun hadn't fully come up when I stepped into the barn. Horses shuffled softly in their stalls, the kind of rhythm I could match without looking. My hands moved without thinking, tossing flakes of hay, checking water buckets, running my palm over the splintered gate I meant to fix last week. That's when I heard her voice. "Scarlett?" I turned. My niece, Thatcher's cousin, stood at the entrance, pajama pants tucked into boots 3 sizes too big. "Hey, sweet pea," I said. "You're up early." She stepped closer, dragging a stick through the dirt like she was drawing lines only she could see. I heard something last night, she said, matter of fact. Aunt Rowena said when you sign, they get it all and send you out. My breath didn't hitch. I didn't flinch. What else did you hear? I asked gently. She shrugged. That was it. They were talking like you weren't even here. Uncle Thatcher said you're just waiting to be replaced. She didn't know what it meant, not fully. But I did. I knelt in front of her, brushing hair behind her ear. You didn't do anything wrong, honey. Thank you for telling me. She smiled, then skipped back toward the house like she'd just shared a bedtime story. I leaned against the stall wall. The truth never stays quiet, even when it comes from a child. Back in the kitchen, I barely had time to pull off my gloves when the phone rang. Not the landline, my cell. Unknown number. Ms. Vale, a young voice said. I'm calling from First Plains Bank. We flagged a $75,000 withdrawal on your joint ranch account and needed verbal confirmation. I blinked. I didn't request a withdrawal. The voice paused. According to our records, there's a co-signature, so we assumed. Send me the full statement history, I said. Now. An hour later, I had it. There it was, dated 3 weeks ago. A signature that looked like mine, close enough to pass a glance, not close enough to fool me. I didn't blink. I documented. I forwarded the email to Odessa and sent her a text. We move now. She replied within minutes. I'll meet you an hour outside Dutton. Dress neutral. Bring originals. I left the house through the back and drove the long way through the hills. When I arrived, Odessa was already sitting on the tailgate of a gray pickup, arms crossed, hair pulled tight, eyes like steel. I don't do drama, she said. Good, I said. Neither do I. We laid out the papers on the truck bed. Every forged signature, every backdated memo, every printout I had from the bank, the county office, the newspaper. Odessa spoke as she flipped through them. We'll file a cease and desist on the account by morning. Freeze it all. They won't know until they swipe a card. She looked up at me. Do not mention it to them. Let them bury themselves. I nodded. Before I left, she handed me a USB drive. Off-site backup. Don't keep it in the house. I returned home as dusk rolled in, wind carrying dust up the drive like it was trying to cover up old tracks. I went straight to my room, changed my passwords, rerouted all online accounts to the new encrypted ones Odessa set up. Then I found the folded map of the ranch, slipped between a stack of old receipts. The one Rowena claimed was ruined in the storm. Dry, intact, dated, with my mother's handwriting in the margins. Always mark what's yours before someone else does. She wasn't talking about fences. Dinner was stiff. Declan chewed slow, like the food tasted different. Rowena wore that soft smile she reserved for lies. Thatcher bragged about new initiatives he had in mind. Solar, leasing to outside vendors, clearing old outbuildings. Rowena chimed in, casually mentioning how they might phase out the old ownership language to modernize contracts. I smiled, listened, said nothing, let them feast. They didn't know the table's about to be cleared. After we ate, I stood up. I'll need a review of all documents signed in the last 6 months, I said, tone calm. For transparency. Rowena froze, eyes cutting sharp. Thatcher dropped his fork. Declan looked like he'd been slapped with a cold cloth. You'll get the list in writing by morning, I added, then walked out. Didn't wait for their response, didn't raise my voice. Just closed the door behind me, slow and firm. Later, alone in my office, I pulled out the folder labeled, In Case. I flipped past the articles and legal filings until I reached a single page. Aged, slightly yellowed, folded into a plastic sleeve. My mother's handwriting. Ownership clause. Simple. Undeniable. They built their plans around forged ink. I was about to speak in my mother's script, The page felt heavier than it should have. I held it up to the window as sunlight crept across the floor, tracing the handwriting like a map I hadn't known I needed. Mom's loops and strokes were clear. Her clause on land ownership was there, her initials in the margin, her final say buried in the drawer like a seed waiting for the right season. Odessa sat across from me, flipping through copies of the forged documents. Her fingers didn't shake. Mine had stopped hours ago. "There's no way this holds up," she said. "Not legally, not ethically." She drafted the affidavit on her laptop while I lined everything out beside her. Original, fake, map, photos, timeline. It all fit now. Truth doesn't scream. It just doesn't flinch. That morning, we scheduled the filing. Tomorrow, it would be official. One step forward, not toward war, but toward record. Later, I stopped by the market. I needed thread and vinegar. I didn't need the stares. They weren't cruel, just sideways, lingering. One woman near the cashier leaned over to her friend. "You hear she tried to sell the ranch to her boyfriend in Denver?" My spine stayed straight. I turned slowly. She smiled at me, too polite to backpedal. "Just what I heard." I took a breath. "Well," I said, "then you'll really love the truth when it shows up in court." She blinked. I didn't wait. I paid and left. Let them doubt me now. Soon they'd regret betting on charm over character. That evening, just before sunset, I asked Declan to meet me in the barn. He came, alone, hands in his coat pockets, the way he always walked when he didn't want to be there but couldn't find the excuse to stay away. I laid out the 3 papers on the workbench: the real will, the forgery, Odessa's notarized affidavit. He read them all, didn't speak until he got to the bottom of the last page. "I didn't want a war," he said. "I wanted peace in my old age." "You chose quiet comfort," I said. "And that comfort's about to end." He looked at me. For the first time in months, he actually looked at me. Then he nodded, didn't say another word. The next day, Odessa and I walked into the courthouse. She wore gray. I wore Mom's scarf. The clerk didn't roll his eyes this time. He sat up straighter. We handed over everything: the affidavit, the chain of custody, the map, dates, copies. The date for mediation was set within 10 minutes. I turned as we walked out and saw Rowena across the lot, sitting in the car, engine off. Her sunglasses stayed on. But her face, I don't know. I think it cracked a little. She used a pen. I used proof. That night, after dinner, I found an envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Inside was a printout of an email from Thatcher to a lawyer. "She doesn't even know we've already filed. It's almost funny." I folded the page and added it to the folder I'd labeled Final Play. They laughed when they thought I was blind. I smiled when I realized they couldn't see me coming. Around midnight, I stepped out to the garden. The rose bush was blooming, too early for that time of year, too bright against the dark. I clipped one, carried it inside, and placed it beside the affidavit on the dining table. In 3 days, they'd all be under oath, and I'd be ready to speak, even if my voice shook. The courthouse felt colder than the outside air, not because of the weather. It was spring now, technically, but because I walked in knowing exactly what had to be done. Odessa walked a half step ahead of me, briefcase swinging in rhythm with her stride. She didn't talk. Neither did I. Inside, Rowena sat at the long oak table in a fitted blazer that screamed money and control. Beside her, Thatcher, arms crossed, jaw tight, trying too hard to look unfazed. Their lawyer wore a tie too wide and a smirk too sharp. Declan's chair was empty. "Health reasons," they said. I didn't react, but I noticed Rowena's smile tightened when she realized I had brought everything: originals, certified copies, the affidavit, the chain of events. The mediator greeted us, opened his folder, and began. As he read through the forged documents, email drafts, bank activity, and the will side by side with the real one, Rowena's face shifted. Smug turned stiff. Calm turned cold. Some people prepare to win. Others prepare to manipulate. I came with truth. Midway through the session, the bailiff delivered an envelope with my name on it. No sender listed. Inside, a voice recorder, and a note written in scratchy ink. From Glenn Avery. A man who used to fish with my dad every Saturday morning. I pressed play. Declan's voice, slurred and quiet. I knew it was wrong, but they said she wouldn't notice. She never fought back before. Silence. Odessa leaned forward. This, she said, qualifies as evidence of intent and coercion. We request an immediate legal freeze on all asset activity until full review. The mediator nodded. Approved. Rowena didn't argue. She didn't blink. She just sat there, hands folded, as if still waiting for someone to come save her. I didn't feel triumphant, just tired. When it was over, Rowena and Thatcher left without a word. Their lawyer followed close behind, already pulling out his phone. I walked out slower. Sunlight had warmed the sidewalk. A few people glanced up from their coffees or errands. Some nodded. Others turned their heads. They'd seen me silent for so long. Maybe now they'd hear what silence sounds like when it ends. That evening, I went back to the ranch alone. The wind had picked up. Dust circled like it had a mind of its own. I walked straight to my desk and pulled out the envelope I'd been avoiding since the day I found it. For when you feel like giving up. Mom's handwriting. I knew every curl of it. Inside, a letter, folded, neat, and a ring, silver, simple. The letter V engraved on the inside band. Her words, "Don't let this land outlive your courage. Don't let their doubt become your story." I sat by the fire and read it again, then again, until the edges softened between my fingers. My eyes burned, but the tears didn't sting. They didn't fall out of grief. They fell from release. I didn't call Declan. Didn't need to. Some doors don't close. They just stop opening. Instead, I called the county registrar and filed a new will. My own. The ranch would go into a trust for young women learning agriculture, not to bloodlines, not to fake heirs. And I changed the name on the front gate. Rourke Ranch was gone. Vale Haven stood in its place. Sometimes you rebuild not because you're broken, but because the foundation was never yours to begin with. At sunrise, I walked into the garden. The rose bush was blooming again. Too early. Too bold. I bent down, clipped a single bloom, and laid it beside the letter and the ring on the kitchen table. Then I placed the scarf with VV, stitched in the corner beside them. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for peace, and finally I'd made room for it.